Lynn Kuntzman, Garden Star, takes the mystery out of winter gardening in this month's edition of Garden for Life. You can send your questions for next month's edition to jx@jeffnet.org. Here's Lynn and Jeffrey Riley.
Lynn, good to have you back on the Jefferson Exchange.
Great to be here.
So I guess the biggest thing that I think about in gardening as fall gives way to winter is for those of us who haven't been doing it long, it's a bit of a mystery on timing. It's not like you can really take the cues like you can in the springtime when the soil gets above a certain temperature and it's, when it's sunny outside.
Right. Yeah, I mean, there's not a lot you're planting now for sure. You can still set out your garlic and shallots and things, but for the most part, you're just kind of hunkering down and protecting your irrigation equipment and, checking drainage in your yard and those kinds of things. So, yeah, and harvesting greens, or Brussels sprouts that you've planted earlier in the season, and they're coming ripe now.
Well,
yeah.
that was one of the things that actually confused me because I was looking at the OSU list about Brussels sprouts and yours as well about November in the food garden and realized I didn't know when the Brussels sprouts should have gone in to come out now.
Right. They go in like in September, and then but the problem for me in my yard is my garden's too small because I've got all my tomatoes and peppers still going in September, and I can't be sticking Brussels sprouts in there, and so I often don't get a fall garden in the way I should. But people can do it if they really, really, really plan and are more meticulous than I am. So you can put all that stuff like cabbage, kale, broccoli, cauliflower, Brussels sprouts in the fall, and then have it in late fall, November, and some of it overwinters, especially the overwinter broccoli is just the best stuff because you put it in the fall, and then in March you've got broccoli. It's like it just makes it through all the cold weather, and it's terrific.
Which still mystifies me, but I was noticing flowers beginning to appear on broccoli that I planted back in September, I guess.
Yeah, right.
Well, so that raises a question then about the overlap part of this, and John and Ashlyn dropped this off after our conversation in October, and he says, I still have tomatoes and cukes in the ground. Is it okay to plant around those while the temps are still conducive to germination, or should he pull the other stuff up before he plants a cover crop, for example?
No, I mean, you actually can plant in amongst the summer crop that you have going, and if you're putting in things like a cover crop, it will just start germinating underneath the peppers and tomatoes and whatever. And then when those vines get killed by frost, what I do is lift the cages off and just cut those at ground level, leave the roots just where they are. Then you're not disturbing the roots of your little cover crop that's coming up. And take haul the. You can either chop the debris and scatter it across the bed, or you can take it to your compost pile. The old tomato vine or pepper plant or whatever you're taking out, cucumber vine. However you're going to deal with that, and then you've got your cover crop already sowed. That's fine to do. There's no problem with that. And the other thing that many people do is they plan to tuck their transplants of their fall crop in between their summer crops, because when it's really hot, those fall plants like broccoli, cauliflower, cabbage appreciate some shade from the taller plants, in the baking hot September weather that we can get. So you can, if you're really planful, you can get your fall, winter crop in around your summer crop.
All right, so the roots of the stuff that's still there, even if you cut it out, but you leave the roots in place, is not going to interfere with the cover crop or anything otherwise inhibit it?
No. Those roots are just going to start to rot and die, and they'll just release their nutrients into the soil, and they'll provide, channels for the water to move down into the soil substrate. So no, leaving the roots in place is a great strategy. They're not going to interfere with the ability of the other little plants around them to put their own roots down. Plants are going to find a way.
Yeah. Lynn Kuntzman's back with us on the Jefferson Exchange for another edition of Garden for Life. Lynn is the Oregon statewide Master Gardener of the Year. Let's see. One of the things I did learn too the hard way. We should also subtitle this, Don't Garden Like Jeff. But
You're right.
But I realized, and I should have known better, the difference between a frost and a freeze. When you get one wanting it, because you can protect your tomatoes from frost, but you can't protect your tomatoes outdoors from a freeze.
You cannot. Yeah, no. I mean, once the temperatures get down, below that 32 and down into that 25, they're done. They're finished. They're black and looking like Night of the Living Dead out there. But yeah, you can absolutely protect them from a frost, and that's easy. You can take a sheet out and throw it over your tomato vine, and a light frost is not going to get through to those plants. They're not going to be damaged. But once things start, when the ground starts getting hard, you're done.
Yeah,
for those summer crops. Yeah,
which is exactly the circumstance. I put a shower curtain over the tomatoes, and then when the vines were looking a little tough the next couple of days, it was like, oh yeah, they did say freeze, not frost.
Right. Yeah. That's different. That's very different. Right.
Absolutely. All right. So let's see. So leave the stuff in there. This gets to another question I got from somebody in the newsroom. So you don't have to clean out. Well, for example, rotten tomatoes, stuff, the actual fruits that have fallen on the ground. Should those stay too, or should you sweep those off?
You can do either. You can leave them out there. The birds will peck at them. They'll germinate next summer. They'll come up. A bunch of seedlings will come up. In the bed next summer. So I usually throw those into the compost pile and let them do their thing there. But I don't always have time to clean that up. So I just chop and drop stuff, and leave it on the beds. That's perfectly fine.
Well, I'm based on your past advice, I'm constantly thinking about the birds and ways they feed themselves over the winter. And is that a good thing to do if you just want to chuck them, near the garden but not in it?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, that's fine. Little critters will eat those, so that it's a good thing. You're supplying some food. Yeah.
All right, and then so now in terms of what you want to do, even if you're not particularly growing anything that's going to overwinter, what's the best advice on covering with mulch or not? I mean, do we want to leave the soil bare all winter, add compost?
I wouldn't leave the soil bare. I put down either a cover crop on my garden beds, or I go and I collect the leaves in the neighborhood because people are sending them all to the landfill, and I put a big thick layer of leaves on my garden beds. What that does is it kills off any weeds that are trying to come up, and God knows those are doing major work in my yard, and so it smothers the weeds, and those leaves are going to break down over the winter with the leaf-eating moths that live in leaf litter and actually eat decaying leaves are going to be in there eating those leaves and pooping and fertilizing your bed, and the birds can come and stir those up and get winter food. But I wouldn't leave the soil uncovered. I would leave it covered either with a cover crop or leaves. To protect it from heavy rain and washing away and that kind of stuff. So it's good to leave leaf habitat out over your garden beds. That's a really good way to do it.
Even over the stuff that you would plant in November, like garlic and shallots?
Yeah, you can even put in that bed. I usually use a thin layer of leaves. So once the garlic comes up, because it starts shooting up pretty much right away. Then I just sprinkle a few leaves over that, and as they grow, you can add a little more heavy layer of leaves. I keep the bags of leaves around, and I kind of use them as I need them in the yard.
Lynn Kunzman's with us once again on the Jefferson Exchange with Garden for Life, and Lynn is a Master Gardener of the Year for the state of Oregon. And so let me ask about your own. You mentioned not being a particularly organized gardener, which I somehow think is a bit of a lie there, Lynn.
No, it's not.
But do you take pictures of the garden? Because I do that sometimes too. Just remember like where I planted stuff. I don't do much journaling, and I probably should because I find myself, for example, asking you the same questions year after year when we've already dealt with some of this.
If you're a really organized person, and I know several of my Master Gardener friends who are, and they keep a journal, a garden journal. I know some of them keep like a map of what they've put out in the garden. Some people keep a page for each vegetable, and they take notes on how they liked it. That's a really good way to do it because, maybe you want to try a new tomato and you want to keep track. I do not do any of that because I for the most part, my husband is the one who puts in the summer garden, and he is not a journal keeper, and so he's the one who's starting those vegetables and getting them into the garden. I'm the one that has to process them once they start producing. So it's sort of a division of labor there, and I'm taking care of neglecting to take care of the pollinator garden in the front yard. So the backyard is kind of Jim's domain. But yeah, we've never kept real records about the plants that we're putting in what garden beds. He remembers where they were last year, and then he rotates them around, so he doesn't plant the tomatoes in the same bed year after year. So we do that, but that's about the extent of our record keeping.
Yeah, I've kept that very much.
It's a really good practice. Mm-hmm. It's a really good practice,
It is, and knowing where stuff went before, because I've been thinking about that from the last couple of times we talked about making sure that you kind of fool the bugs, put the stuff in different parts of the garden next year.
You bet, yeah. Especially for things like cole crops that can get things, critters that like to eat their roots, and if you're growing cabbage in the same bed year after year, you're just setting up a fail situation, because those things are going to be overwintering in the soil and then ready to eat your new little guys that you put out there. So it's really important to rotate your vegetables, your crops. Yeah.
One of the things I notice on your November in the food garden checklist is to rake leaves and stems gently up into mounds under trees and shrubs. And this is a butterfly aid, it sounds like.
Right. That's that habitat that we were, so we're not calling leaves litter anymore.
Right.
We're calling them habitat. And if people can't stand the look of them in the yard, then push them into windrows underneath your shrubs and hide them under the vegetation in your yard that way, under your trees, under your shrubs, so that there is some winter protection for our insects that we need for our baby birds to eat in the spring. Yeah.
Okay. Since we have you now, and we probably won't speak to you before Christmas, I know we've talked about some gardening Christmas gift ideas in the past, and I know gloves seems to be number one on the list, and I would recommend a hat too for the folks with the pale skin and the sunshine. Right. What after the gloves and hat would be number one on your list?
Well, I would say for older gardens like myself, one of those kneelers, that it can be either a seat or a kneeler if you're out and your beds are low and you need to get down on your knees, because it has some handles you can push yourself up with if you're kind of getting old and creaky like me. But my number one gardening tool is a hori knife.
Aha!
And
that's what I wrote down. Hori knife.
Hori knives are really cool, and spend the money, go online, get the one with the riveted wooden handle. You'll have it for the rest of your life. It's a really well-made tool. It's got one edge that's serrated, one that is just a blade, and then it's got a place for cutting twine, and it's just a fabulous. I use it for planting my plants. I use it for weeding and cutting through nasty roots, in the garden. I use it for everything. So it's really kind of an all-purpose hand tool.
Because it cuts, it digs. I mean, it's a rather thick blade, as I recall.
It is a thick blade, so you can use it like a trowel, and then you can use it as a cutting tool as well. So it's really it's a good one.
And as far as gloves go, you want gloves that are cloth but have some gripping, rubbery surface, right?
Right. I like the ones that have the cloth back and that really nubby vinyl, bumpy, rubbery kind of palm. If you buy just the cotton gloves, you're going to go through them in 2 seconds if you're doing any kind of. No, seriously. I mean,
yeah.
It's just insane. Don't spend your money on something that's not going to hold up. I even run through those heavy duty rubbery ones, but they last for a couple months at least. But if they're just cloth, they're not going to do it. And if you're pruning roses, you really need to get heavy leather gloves. Mm-hmm. Even the nubby rubbery ones will not protect you from thorns, and so you need to have those heavy leather gloves, and be sure you've got a current tetanus shot.
Good idea.
Because we do have tetanus, and thorn sticks can do that to you.
All right, Lynn Kuntzman, Master Gardener. Thanks for joining us once again for Garden for Life on the Jefferson Exchange.
Absolutely. Have a nice holiday.